Hey, welcome everybody. It is a blessing to be with you. Thank you for joining us for the next in our series of A Course in Miracles Made Easy. And as always, we like to start with a moment of prayer and intention. If you'd care to join me. We thank you, Great Spirit, for the opportunity to be together, to meet, to support each other, to tap into divine source and recognize that none of us are alone. So we now open our minds and hearts to the presence of Great Spirit, Holy Spirit, higher power, to really speak to our hearts and minds that bring us comfort, clarity, vision, passion, motivation, purpose, connection, deep trust, and the abiding awareness that we are deeply loved and all is well. If you care to say with me out loud, and so it is, and so it is. Well, this is the perfect time for a Course in Miracles gathering because there are things going on in the world that are challenging to the ego. The ego does not like it, but the ego doesn't like anything. The ego wants to make a problem out of everything. The ego also teaches us that there is an order of difficulty in miracles. And some situations are harder to heal than others. It would appear that a world pandemic is a real big problem, harder to heal. Of Course in Miracles says not really. It says it's just as much of a dream as anything else. And the Course in Miracles wants to be the great leveler, the great equalizer, and recognize that all problems are really the same. We believe we're separate from God. We believe we're bodies only. We believe that fear is the way to navigate the world. All those things are manifestations of one mistaken idea that somehow we were cast off from God, which we were not. And so what the Course wants us to do is to awaken from the bad dream and claim first a happy dream, which says that even as we walk through the world of form and bodies, that God is very present. And then eventually we can even grow beyond walking in the world as bodies and recognize that we are spiritual beings. And everything else is commentary. Okay, so our subject matter today is as always, it's from my book, A Course in Miracles Made Easy, expounding on the Course. And this chapter is called the Distractive Factor. Let's get it up so you can see it. One moment. Oops, hang on there. And so we're going to look today at the ways that ego attempts to distract us from our mission and our purpose as divine beings. So let's give a little foundation. So ego believes, now ego is the small, limited idea of self that we have chosen to replace the truth that we are divine. And it does not want us to know that we are magnificent. It has a big investment in us living small. And it defines the status quo, the known, as good, even if the status quo sucks. And so every time we attempt to launch out and claim our spiritual wholeness and the fact that we're divine beings, it will throw up some kind of smoke screen, play some kind of game, some kind of trick on us that will gather us back into its fold of fear. There's an interesting movie called Meetings with Remarkable Men. Meetings with Remarkable Men. It's kind of a 70s or 80s movie, kind of a dramatized documentary of, more of a drama, of the life of George Gurdjieff, who is a mystic who lived in Russia probably in the 1800s or so, very advanced being. And there's one scene in which Gurdjieff comes to a small village, and he sees some children playing in a schoolyard. And one kid is standing in the middle of kind of a chalk circle that has been drawn around him. And he's trying to get out. And every time he attempts to step across this white circle, he kind of gets pushed back. And Gurdjieff asks somebody what's going on. He says, well, the people in this village believe that the devil has drawn the circle around him, and if he steps beyond it, the devil will get him. So it's not really the devil pushing him back in, but it's his own fear and his own belief that tells him, if I step beyond this circle, I will die. And that's kind of what the ego does. It prescribes a circle of fear around us and says, you are safe in this circle, but if you step beyond it, you will die. Now, the big lie is that if you step beyond it, you will live. I remember when I was in college, I had been Orthodox Jewish for many years, and I ate kosher food and observed all the rituals. And then one summer, I just decided to go beyond it. In fact, there's a little bit of a backtrack on the backstory in that it was a Yom Kippur day. It was a fast day. And I had been involved in Judaism for 7 years. I picked it up when I was about 14 years old. I loved it. It was very beautiful, a beautiful religion and beautiful community. And I remember one night, you're not supposed to eat. And I was really hungry. And I was fighting the impulse to eat. And I didn't know why I was fasting. And the only thing I could come up with was, I was afraid that God would punish me if I ate. And a voice in my head said, you know, fear is not a good reason to do a religion, and it's certainly not a good enough reason to do a life. And I realized that even though my participation in Judaism had been very pure and loving in the beginning, it had declined, so it became about fear. And I did something very bold. I ate a piece of cake. And that was my end of Judaism for me. But it was the beginning of another life. And I began to explore spirituality. And I did yoga and meditation. I went to Zen retreats, and I went to different religious gatherings and different consciousness gatherings. And suddenly my entire world opened up, because I was now free to explore and learn. I think that was the beginning of my spiritual expansive journey. And then the next summer, I decided to go to Europe with a buddy. And I remember sitting on the plane, and it was the first time that I was not eating kosher food. And I just was so scared that the plane was going to crash because I ate some non-kosher food. But I figured, you know, if life is about fear and protection and dogma, then let it crash, because I didn't want to live like that. Well, thank God, of course, the plane did not crash. And I've been on many planes since then. They haven't crashed, thank God. And you know, it was one of those determining moments where I had to decide what I really believed in. Now let's play a little more with how the ego makes problems for us. So when I was in high school, we graduated. Now, right before graduation, the class went to Washington, D.C. We were in New Jersey, and the custom in those days was to go to Washington with your class for your class trip, highly chaperoned. And at the end of the school year, the yearbook came out, and we opened up the yearbook, and my buddy, there's a 2-page spread of all these high school students standing on the bleachers in front of the Capitol building. Tradition. And a friend of mine says, do you notice anything funny about this picture, Alan? No, it looks normal to me. Well, who's standing on the upper left corner of the bleacher? Well, that's Arnie Goldstein. Who's standing on the upper right corner of the bleacher? It's Arnie Goldstein. How did Arnie Goldstein, who is not twins, get to be standing on both ends of the bleachers at the same time? And I just couldn't figure it out. So the guy said, well, let me explain it. He said, in those days, they had these cameras that would start on one end of a wide picture and very slowly roll across to get everybody in the wide panoramic picture. So Arnie Goldstein knew this trick. And so as soon as the camera passed by him on one side, he jumped down behind the bleachers, ran as quickly as possible to the other side, and got back up on the other side. Maybe I'll show you that picture in the next webinar. I still have it. And so, many years later, I realized this is exactly how the ego works. If you shine light on it somewhere, and you identify that the ego is trying to trick you, then the ego will run behind the bleachers and pop up at a different place and try to scare you with a different fear. But really, it's the same ego playing the same trick, just using a different form. It's like the same puppeteer who's just changed heads on the puppet. And it seems like a different puppet, but it's really the same puppeteer just trying to trick you by thinking it's different. So the ego is extremely, extremely, extremely clever in trying to make us think that problems are different from one another, that some fears are more justified than others. And as we said in the previous seminar, fear is never justified in any form. That's what the Course in Miracles tells us. Fear is never justified in any form. And the form that it takes doesn't really matter. So this is the key to remember. Okay. So let's look in particular at how the ego tries to dissuade us. So let's begin by recognizing that everybody has some resistance to A Course in Miracles. If you're in a body, you have some resistance. If you have some identification with the body, you believe that, I better protect myself, otherwise bad things will happen. And so the Course anticipates resistance and gives us tools to overcome it. And even in the very beginning of the workbook, the Course tells us, you are going to have resistance. Now let's just backtrack one more time. So I wrote this book because a lot of people told me, I started the Course in Miracles and I just couldn't get through the workbook lessons. I got to 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, and then I put it down. And it sat on my shelf for 10 years sometimes. Picking it up again, but how can I keep going this time? And I say, read the introduction to the workbook. It says, you will have resistance. Some lessons you will really like, and some lessons you will not want to do. Some lessons you will understand, other lessons you will not understand. You will find many, many ways not to do the workbook. So it's no big surprise to Jesus, the author of the workbook, that we have resistance to it. It's a known, it's expected. It's a known quantity. So what we're doing in today's lesson is shining light on the various forms of resistance so we can go beyond them. It's a very practical lesson. So I came up with some resistance busters. And these are 5 or 6 ideas that will help you stay with the workbook and stay with the Course. Now, the Course is not for everybody, but if you think it has value for you, it will have value for you. You wouldn't be watching this broadcast if you didn't know it had value for you. So let's look at some of the resistance busters. First of all, do the workbook lessons. Just do them. And it's 1 lesson a day for 365 days. It starts out very simple, just a couple minutes. It gets more complex as you go along. But just do them. If you don't understand them, do them. If you don't like them, do them. If you're bored, do them. If you're excited, do them. If you feel guilty, do them. Do not let laziness or fear or distractions stop you. Don't use missing any or a lot of the lessons as an excuse to feel guilty. So we're back to Arnie Goldstein. So what happens is, I mean, this is, of course, is so brilliant. The woman who channeled it, Helen Schuckman, was a clinical psychologist. And she had a very deep and penetrating understanding of how the mind works. And the mind has various defense mechanisms and projections, and it's going to try to trick you. So back to Arnie Goldstein, the ego says, don't do this course. You don't have the time to do it. Too busy. It's too Christian. It's not Christian enough. Pages are too thin. People are going to laugh at you. You're Jewish. You're Buddhist. You're Muslim. Jews, Buddhists, and Muslims don't do the Course in Miracles. Well, I guess they do. There's a lot of people in all religions doing the Course. So first of all, it tries to get you not to do it. But then you do it anyway. And then you're doing it, and it's going to run around the back of the bleachers and find some other way to get you not to do it. So the ego's main trick, the ego's main device to keep you in spiritual prison is guilt. And the Course really is not against anything, but if you could say it was against something, you could say it was against guilt, because it says that guilt is never of God. There's no such thing as guilt in the mind of God. It's a story we made up. We said before that Voltaire said that God created us in his image and likeness, and we return the compliment. So we make God into this punitive parent that just is not true. And so if guilt can't get you one way, you're going to be doing the lessons. You're going to get to page 30, 40, whatever it is, and you're going to get sidetracked from doing the lessons. You're going to miss doing the lessons, some of them, and you're going to feel guilty for not doing the lessons. So I'm screwed up. I missed three lessons. I missed a day. I missed 5 sessions today. Forget it. Too much. Guilty. Well, the ego has just gotten you. It's just grabbed you. It's Arnie Goldstein. I don't know where he is these days. If you're watching this, Arnie, give me a call. But the ego goes run around behind the bleachers. It couldn't get you guilty here, but it will get you guilty here. And this is the best time to not let it get you. You say, okay, I missed a few lessons. Jesus said in the introduction to the Course in Miracles, in the introduction to Work, you're going to miss some lessons. All right, he planned on this. So if he's smart enough to write an entire Course in Miracles and smart enough to know that I'm going to miss some lessons, maybe he's smart enough to know that if I continue the lessons, I'm going to get healed. I'm going to have miracles. I'm going to be a happy person. My body's going to start to work. My relationships are going to start to work. I'm going to start enjoying my life. I'm going to shift from the evil dream, from the nightmare, to the happy dream. So let me get back on the horse. I fell off the horse for a couple lessons or a day or two. Let me get back on the horse. And you get back on and you continue. And your commitment and dedication and connection and benefits from the Course run deeper now because you refuse to let guilt get you. Again, the Course says guilt is never appropriate. There is no such situation in the entire universe that is a valid cause for you to feel guilty. Now, we do make mistakes, we have to correct them, but that's the difference between a sin and a mistake. Sin requires punishment, a mistake simply requires correction. And the Course wants to move us from a sin mentality to basically an error mentality where we can correct error. Sin, S-I-N, self-inflicted nonsense. The Course is adamant that there's no reason for guilt. It's the whole Course. If you're not guilty, what are you? You're innocent. And the Course goes over and over and over again, you are innocent. I'm innocent, I'm innocent, I'm innocent, I'm innocent. There was a scene in the movie Good Will Hunting where the protagonist, I guess it's Will, feels guilty about something. I forget the story. And Robin Williams, who plays his therapist, grabs him by the collar and shakes him against the wall. And he just says, "It's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault." And at that point, somebody had tried to make me feel guilty for something. I was starting to agree with them. And when I saw that movie, Robin Williams saying, "Not your fault, not your fault, not your fault," I felt released because I realized that what this person said was my fault was not really my fault. And then I believe, was it the movie Woodstock? It was some movie where they did a documentary on a rock festival. It might have been Woodstock. Or maybe it was Burning Man. I think it was Burning Man. There's somebody who goes around to random people and he just walks up to them. I never saw him before. And he just looks them in the eye, takes their hand. He says, "It's not your fault. It's not your fault." And people start crying. They break into tears because everybody carries some guilt. Everybody believes that something is your fault, and it's not. And by the way, you can post your questions if you like. Our brother Nishank is standing by in Mumbai, and he will field your questions and screen them. And at the end, it'll take a few minutes to go over them. Not your fault. It's not your fault. I know a woman who grew up Catholic, and she believed she was guilty about everything. And anything that went wrong in her world around her, in her life or the lives of people around her, she thought it was her fault. And so she created an endless stream of busyness, endless errands, endless emergencies, endless dramas, endless distractions, because she was scared to look within. She was afraid that if she sat quietly for even a minute, that she would see horrible devils and dragons and demons. They would devour her because she was such an evil person. So she was scared to look at herself. And the truth is, she was a lovely person. There's nothing wrong with her. But she was trained in the martial art of guilt. So they say the Jews invented guilt and the Catholics perfected it. Well, I knew Muslims too, and Buddhists and Taoists, and they're all pretty good at guilt. Mostly the Western religions more than the Eastern ones. And so we got to get out from under the blanket of guilt. It's not your fault. Not your fault. So if you mess up doing some lessons, if you get angry, if you get upset, if you hurt somebody, keep moving on. Don't stop here. Do not use messing up as an excuse to not keep moving ahead. And the ego's got you, the devil got you. I don't believe in an official devil, but the ego is kind of representation of devil. It's the part of us that keeps us in fear and small and causes all the problems in the world. Okay, so let's see what else we're going to do to bust the ego, to bust resistance. So don't use any missing lessons as an excuse. Next, study the text and teacher's manual as you feel guided, as you go along. Now, a lot of people say to me, "I'm new to the course. What's the best way to do it?" And a lot of people say to me, "I started the text, but it was so heavy in time, revelation, and miracles, and Jesus Christ, and atonement, and forgiveness. I thought I was back in catechism. I put the thing aside. It was too much." And I say, not necessary. I say, start with a workbook. The workbook is just 2 minutes a day to start. Real simple, real simple. And then progress little by little by little. And as you're doing the workbook is the practical application of the course. You do not need to read through the entire text before you get to the workbook. Now, what I recommend is that you do the workbook and then study the text and the manual for teachers simultaneously. In other words, pick up the text. You can either read it through directly, in sequence, or you can just pick up a section or pick up a page. I guarantee you, this is something I promise you, that whatever page of A Course in Miracles you pick up at any given moment, it will speak to you. It is a holographic teaching, which means that the entire course is contained in any one sentence. And if you really get one sentence, or one paragraph, or one page, or one section, if you really get the essences of it, you got the whole course. The course is unbelievably redundant by design. It's, it says in the introduction, this whole course can be summed up in these few words. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. Boom. Close the book. Now, if you could really get that, then you wouldn't need the rest of the text, you wouldn't need the rest of the workbook, you wouldn't need the manual for teachers, you wouldn't need the ancillary pamphlets and materials. That is the one message the Course wants to deliver. But just in case you might not have gotten it on day one, it's going to give you 365 lessons to practice it, each of which is saying the same thing from a different angle. This is the angelic Arnie Goldstein. In other words, there's a devilish Arnie Goldstein that runs around and tries to trick you. But the angelic Arnie Goldstein runs around and says, well, you didn't get the message from this angle. Let me give you lesson 37. Let me give you lesson 83. If you didn't get 83, I'll try 117. And so this is why you can really get the whole course from any one lesson or any one paragraph or any page. Believe me, it's really true. But if you want to have some fun, keep reading, do the whole course. And you'll just, after a while, it's just fun because you just keep hearing fabulous, healing, uplifting messages from many different angles. And that I love reading the course. I'll just pick it up and, oh, thank you. It's just what I needed to hear today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so just do the lessons and then do the text and manual simultaneously. Now, soothe your resistance. What does this mean? Don't buck your resistance. The more you buck your resistance, the more the resistance will buck you. Meaning that if you notice you have resistance, don't fight it. You understand that fighting is a form of resistance. So if resistance tries to get you and you fight your resistance, then you have a fight going on. And one of the beautiful aspects of the Course is it doesn't fight anything. The Course is not against anything, it is for healing. You understand? So it's like a country wisdom. Never wrestle with a pig. You both get dirty and the pig likes it. Meaning that if you get upset with yourself because you missed some lessons, or you got upset with a person, or you're angry, or defensive, or you did something the Course says you shouldn't do, and you get upset with yourself, now you're doing the exact thing you're trying to grow beyond. Mother Teresa was invited to speak at an anti-war rally, and she refused. And she said, fighting war is another form of war. So I'm not into war. If this were a pro-peace rally, I would go. But because it's an anti-war rally, I don't want to make any more war than there already is. What a fabulous response, fabulous response. So what it's saying is anytime you duke it out with the ego has won. Because the Holy Spirit doesn't duke it out with anybody. It says something the Holy Spirit merely observes. And the Holy Spirit is not even aware of the ego in the sense that it refuses to take it seriously. It doesn't give it credence. It doesn't give it power. And so don't give the ego power by fighting against it. I want somebody to put a tree on a sign on a tree in the local park. It said, kill your ego. Well, any form of murder is ego. So if you want to kill your ego, you're an ego. It's a trick. Arnie Goldstein's run around again. Okay, kill me, kill the ego. Well, the moment you're into killing something consciousness, you're an ego. Ego is so clever. It's freaking brilliant. We should study it to learn how to be clever. But we have to grow beyond that kind of cleverness, can't we? Shouldn't we? So it says, don't fight your ego, don't try to kill it, don't worry about it. Just kind of keep it to the side. Think of it as a petulant child. When I went to Disneyland many years ago, I saw they were giving out leashes. I don't know if it's a great idea spiritually, but people do it, where they would put their leash on their hand with a long, long wire to keep kids from running off. I guess it has a purpose because sometimes little kids run off into Disneyland and parents can't find them. So if your kid is unusually petulant, they'll want you to leash yourself to your kid. You can decide if it's morally correct or not, but I guess if you want to get through Disneyland, it might work. So what you want to do is keep your ego on a short leash and give it some space to do some stuff, but don't let it run your life. One of the lessons is, I have a kingdom I must rule, from the workbook. And the basic idea is that you have been given domain over your life. And you have to take charge of your ego. So, have the first piece of pie, but you don't really need 4 more. Let yourself be upset for a few moments. If you're really upset, let the upset run through, but don't stew in it. In other words, keep your ego in hand. We all have an ego. I have an ego. Everybody's watching has an ego. Just the way it is. So just give it a little space to move around a little bit, but don't let it run your life. And trying to squash or kill or fight or have a crusade against your ego doesn't work. Now, religions have traditionally attempted to make people squash their instincts. I know a guy he was in a Catholic monastery. This was many years ago. Hopefully they've progressed by now. But the monks were taught that they had to beat themselves with little hooks, and they had to shower with their underwear on so as not to arouse their carnal passions. And then meanwhile, my buddy told me that lots of the monks were gay and just getting on in gay beds behind the scenes. So the particular form of squashing didn't really work, did it? So fighting against yourself. The Course says, do not fight yourself. 4 words, do not fight yourself. In other words, don't wrestle with yourself. Don't let yourself run your life, but don't make yourself your own enemy. And this is where kindness to self comes in. This is where self-acceptance comes in. This is where patience comes in. This is where forgiveness comes in. Be kind to yourself, please. There's enough people in your life who've been mean to you. You don't need to add to that list. So soothe your ego and say, okay, look, ego, the ego wants you to go eat something or do something or be a workaholic or do something. Okay, say, look, ego, I'm going to take 15 minutes to do my Course in Miracles lesson today. Okay, so it's now that time. So if you don't mind just sitting here, be a good boy, girl, just sit there for a while. And when I come back, we can go have that pie. When I come back, you can go be mad at that person. Just kind of put your ego aside and just say, I'm not going to kill you. I'm not going to fight you. But you need to give me some time to be with something that's really important to me, okay? And the ego will say, okay, I'll give you 10 minutes. It's a silly game we play with the minds. But if this will buy you 15, 20, 30 minutes to do A Course in Miracles, do it. Because I guarantee you that the time you take doing the Course will help you grow beyond ego. and ego will have less and less and less power over your life. Not by beating it with a hatchet or blowing it up or doing something horrible to it, squashing it, by doing the thing that works better. We're going to come to that in just a minute or two. Soothe the resistance. Now, notice when and how resistance arises and the form it takes. How interesting is that? So you are now adopting the perspective of an observer, the witness. So you say, okay, I'm sitting here getting ready to meditate, and the ego says, maybe you should go to the bathroom before you meditate because you might have to go while you're meditating. Maybe not. Let me sit here. You're supposed to text that person. Maybe you should text them before you start meditating. No, because I know what happens then. And I start texting everybody. I'll never get to meditate. Maybe you left the stove on. That's really dangerous. Maybe you got coronavirus. Oh, that's a scary thing. What should I do if I got coronavirus? Oh my God. So after a while, it's kind of funny, isn't it? So the ego, notice your ego's favorite tricks to distract you. And then you kind of become hip to them. You think, well, last time I meditated, you told me that maybe I left the gas on. And I went to look at it and I didn't. So now they're telling me maybe I left the gas on, maybe I don't need to look again. Or last time you said you need to go to the bathroom, and I went, and I don't think I really needed to go. So get hip to how your ego attempts to trick you. And then it won't have the same, the tricks won't be so powerful because, that's ego. How you doing? Good to see you, ego. What's going on? That was a good one. You really got me to get up. I got really scared last time. That was a good one. Nah, I don't think I'm going to play that game again. So get hip to how the ego works. And then the ego, you're bigger than the ego. Your true self is smarter than the ego. Your true self is more powerful than the ego. Your true self is more powerful than the news. You watch the news, you get scared. All right, I got scared. Is there a self in me that's not scarable? Yeah. Let me drop into the self in me that's not scarable. Oh, that feels good. That feels good. So get hip to how the ego works, become familiar with its tricks, and don't let yourself be hoodwinked by them. Now, finally, this is the best one. This is the most practical one. Cultivate habits that make you truly feel good. What does that mean? It means that fear and ego and resistance all function at a pretty dense frequency. And when you do things at a higher frequency, the things that attract you at a lower frequency don't have the same power over you. Make sense? Example. Many, many years ago, one of my students came to me and said, I've been smoking weed every day for 10 years. And I tried everything, can't seem to stop. I said, great, don't stop. Really? Everybody else says I should stop. No, I don't think you should stop. What should I do? Well, here's what you do. And I asked her, what do you like to do that makes you feel really good, even better than smoking weed? Yeah, well, I like to come to your programs. Yeah, cool. I like to read A Course in Miracles. Yeah. I like to go to yoga. Yeah, I like to play tennis. Yeah, I like to walk in nature. Yeah, cool. So I say, okay, let's play this game. For 30 days, put weed smoking aside as an issue. Don't fight it. But do these other things that make you feel even better. Cultivate the habits that take you to higher vibrations. She said, great, I'll do it. She came back a month later. She said, I lost all interest in smoking weed. She said, I started meditating and I started feeling so good that I took a couple tokes and it didn't feel so good anymore. She said, I kind of lost interest in it. I said, cool. And so what she did was she leveraged her higher power to overcome the lower power, which is not really power, but it's more of a habit. Now, a lot of you are in 12-step programs or know people and love people who are. Why do 12-step programs work? Well, they say, I am now turning my life over to God. I cannot beat alcoholism or drug addiction or sex addiction. Myself, I've tried, it doesn't work. But maybe there's a higher power that can help me with it. Let me tune in with God. Let me line up with higher power. I can't do this anymore. God, I tried. My life is unmanageable. I need help. And so that prayer literally lifts you to a higher frequency. You are now developing a very real connection with God who functions at the highest frequency. And when you're functioning at the highest frequency, things at the lower frequency don't really attract you anymore. Now you may have some issues up and down here and there, but eventually the higher prevails over the lower. That spirit is always, always, always more powerful than ego. And when spirit and ego meet, spirit and wins. There's no contest. Ego can go booga 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 and try to scare spirit. Spirit is unscarable. So you want to do whatever it takes to lift you to the highest vibration, and as a result, the lower vibrations fall away. You don't fight them off. You don't beat them off. You graduate from them. They're not interesting to you anymore. They don't attract you anymore because you found something that's far more attractive. You know, Course asks us, who would try to fly with the tiny wings of a sparrow when the mighty wings of an ego? Oh, sorry, my mistake. Eagle. I'm saying ego so much. The mighty wings of an eagle are available to you. So your bad habits are little sparrow. I like sparrows. I don't mean to make them wrong, but it's just an analogy. But there's, there's another analogy I'll give you. That do you know that when eagles fly, sometimes crows come to attack them, try to get them food or bug them or fight with them. Eagles can't be bothered. What they do is they have such big wings that they rise higher and higher, and there's an altitude they can reach that the crows can't reach. They don't fight with the crows. They can't be bothered with fighting with the crows. That's like wrestling with pigs. They rise to the highest altitude, and the crows are doing their thing down there, but the eagles have the whole sky available to them. And so when you line up with spirit, you are now in alignment with the power that created the entire universe, the power that flung stars into space, power that created the heavens and the earth. That's the power you have available when you align with spirit. Fun, huh? Okay, in just a minute we'll go to our Q&A. I have a couple more points for you. Don't believe everything you think. Someone said this, I like this. It means that there are many thoughts that are rambling through your head at any moment, any day. Most of them are false. So don't get sucked into believing that what you're thinking must be true. I know we want to think that what we think is true, but most of it isn't. Example, I did a retreat once at a kind of rustic retreat center on Maui. And there was a lady who complained about a lot of stuff. And I'll call her Barbara. Barbara's very nice, but I'll just make up a name here. I know a lot of nice Barbaras. And bed was too lumpy, and it was too cold, and the food wasn't good. And she said, oh, this place was too rustic. At the end of it, she said, I wouldn't come back to a place like this again. So after the retreat, another lady from the retreat went with Barbara to a luxury hotel, the Grand Wailea in Maui, $500 a night. And they stayed there for a couple of days. And I saw this other lady later, and I said, well, how'd you make out at the Grand Wailea with Barbara? Oh, she complained about everything. She had there was a bug in the room, and she didn't like the food, and she just everything was not right there. And I thought, well, wherever you go, there you are. That she took her mindset, which said there's something wrong with my environment. And the rustic environment was no good, but then the luxury environment was also no good. I guarantee you, wherever she went, it would have been no good. Because she was seeing through a lens of resistance and fear and judgment. And when you do that, everything is fearful and resistible and judgeable. So don't believe everything you think, especially the stuff that says there's a big fat problem and you can't be happy until you solve it. Of course, says, I'm never upset for the reason I think. We make up stories to justify upset. Stuff does not make us upset. We choose to be upset, and then we find stuff to hang our upset on. I was on a radio show once, and the guy called in and said, why is there so much road rage? And the host, who was also a spiritual teacher, said, because people want to be upset. And the road is a good excuse to be upset. Lesson 51, I'm never upset for the reason I think. Might be an early lesson. I wonder if I got that right. We'll find out. Okay, so we're going through a period of great change now, great transformation on the planet. Course tells us that all change is helpful. All change is helpful. So if you're in a resistance mode to the Course in Miracles or anything, you're going to resist change. But change, even though things seem weird, the change is helpful. Course tells us that trust is the bedrock of the teacher of God's entire thought system. I've said this before, but I'm bringing this up now because a lot of people are nervous and anxious about what's happening in the economy with the pandemic. And the Course wants to tell us that there's no reason that justifies mistrust. It says that everything that happens in your life is a chance to practice trust in the presence of God. Of course, tells us that trust would settle every problem now. It doesn't say some problems. It doesn't say trust would settle every problem except coronavirus now. Trust would settle every problem except the economy now. No, it says trust would settle every problem now. But take it or leave it. Hope to take it. And finally, Course tells us, leave room for God, and you will find yourself so filled with power that nothing will prevail against your peace. Truer words were never spoken. And so it is. Thank you. Okay, well, once again, it looks like we're on time and on course for our Q&A session. So my brother Nishank is standing by in Mumbai, early in the morning Mumbai. Let's corral some of the questions and see what people want to ask, and I'll see what I can do to provide answers.
Hey, Alan. Thanks for the lovely presentation. We've got lots of questions today.
Okay.
And guys, please excuse me if I can't pronounce your name very well. There is someone by the name of Shukin who asks, are we making a difference in this uncertain world for practicing the lessons while we are on a lockdown? Very relevant.
That's the best time to practice the lessons.
Question, I thought you can answer.
You can't claim you're too busy. Yes, every time you think a thought in alignment with God, every time you choose peace, every time you choose trust, you're sending out a set of vibrations. Of course, the Course tells us that all minds are joined. So what you and I are doing with our minds is absolutely affecting all minds. And that's why prayer and meditation and visualization and affirmation at this time go a long, long way, much farther than if things were easier in that world. So yes, please, please, please practice the Course at this time. I guarantee you'll have no shortage of opportunities to practice it. And then as you line up with your spirit, you become a blessing to the entire world. Even people you never meet or hear about, you are blessing them by your prayerful thoughts and attitude. Okay?
Thank you, Alan. That's reassuring. Chris asks, why is the text written in a way that is hard to read or follow? Is there a purpose in that?
Well, that's a really good question, isn't it? For two reasons I can come up with. One is that the person who channeled it was a clinical psychologist, and she was into mental dynamics. And so a lot of the terms are psychological and mental, intellectual. But a deeper answer might be that we also tend to be intellectual. And Jesus was attempting to reach us where we live. And so for people who like to chew on intellectual ideas and discuss those things and have arguments, and not that of course wants us to argue, but it appeals to the intellect because we have been trained that the intellect is the way to process the world and solve problems and find healing. It's not really. It's actually a very minor tool in the big picture. However, it gets our attention. And if you really work with the intellect and bring spiritual concepts into the intellect, it will eventually lead you to peace. It's kind of like a trick to get us to move from where we are to where we need to be by allowing us to play with where we are, so the guide with a capital G can take us where we need to be. And I would say, finally, if you don't understand it, that's fine. Pick up another section, you'll understand more. I sometimes read an entire passage and I don't understand a word of it, but I feel really good at the end because Jesus has imbued the Course with love. Even those big metaphysical, intellectual ideas are imbued with love. So if you could just be in the present, when you just pick up the Course, there's so much love and power imbued in it that it just vibrates with divine energy. So even if you read something and don't understand it, that's fine. Just be with it and let it work. Edgar Cayce used to learn by osmosis. He was a bad student. This is a true story. And his father criticized him for being a bad student. So he would go to sleep. He would put a book under his pillow, or he'd put his head down on the desk, and he would know the material. Edgar Cayce actually did this. So if you don't like reading it, do this, and maybe you'll get it. Whatever it takes. Okay, thank you, Nishank. Next.
Thanks for that tip, Alan. Dana asks, I think she left off with the lesson 6 months back, and she asked, can we pick up where we left off, even if it is 6 months?
Oh, yeah.
Even if we are 6 months.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because somebody once said, well, I get to lesson 40 and then I drop it. I keep going. She said, I've done lesson 1 through 40 12 times. And I said, it's time for 41, please. I said, that's another trick. Okay, well, I have to go back to the beginning. I didn't get it right. I have to go back. Another trick. Arnie Goldstein is running around the back of the bleachers once again. No, it's time to do lesson 62. Dana, I believe that's your name. Just carry on. I don't care if you forgot what happened. Just carry on. All the lessons are the same. So if you didn't get it in the first 60, you get it in lesson 61.
Lovely. And there's it's a great question and a funny line in that. So Alan, would you like to speak to the process of forgiveness? I notice a thought like, my brother is spirit in divine reality, but he is yelling about neighbors yelling. Then forgiveness is simply letting the thought go and simply remembering the truth. Is that so? Or look within and see my upset and let that go. My ego wants to get it right now.
Well, all your ideas are good. Forgiveness really means that which I thought had power over me, that doesn't have power. And I gave my power to the person yelling. I gave my power to my brother. And really, there's a me that's so much bigger than those upsets. So let me rise to the highest me and see the situation from a higher perspective, and it will have no power over me. The Course says that every act is either a pure expression of love or a call for love. So from a mindset of forgiveness, you can reinterpret your brother and the other person as calling for love, and ask yourself, what would love do? People wear these little bracelets, WWJD, what would Jesus do? Well, you can wear WWLD, what would love do? Or what would forgiveness do? Or what would letting go do? And just reach around for the place inside yourself that should have space for them to be who they are. And remember that there's no situation that is worth giving your peace away for. And when peace becomes more important than anything else, that's exactly what you'll have.
Thank you. And I think one more question. Eugene asks, can you pray to the higher spirit for help in solving our personal problems? And how can we do that from a Course in Miracles perspective? And after that, how do we know that we are listening to his answers?
So yeah, we have to pray from a personal perspective because that's where we're starting from. And the Course and God and Jesus are not above helping us with our daily needs. There's a famous story about Helen who channeled the Course, and she was trying to find a particular kind of coat, I forget the name of the kind of coat, and green pantyhose. And Jesus guided her to a particular store where she found the coat on sale as well as the pantyhose. And in the interim, she connected with a salesman who had a special needs son. And Helen was an expert in that form of special needs, and she helped that guy with his son. So the whole scenario was operating at two different levels. One is Jesus was helping her meet her material needs, and at the same time, she was meeting her spiritual mission of helping that man. So it's fine, you need enough food. I would like to have some food. I would like to have a healthy relationship. I would like to feel good in my body. I would like to be prosperous in this world. God does not want us to be poor and impoverished. That's not the will of God. So yes, it's fine to ask for personal needs. And then you release them. And you say, okay, now put these in the hands of God. If this is right for me, bring it on. If not, maybe something else good will happen. And how do you know when the answer came? Well, when you feel peace. The only real answer to prayer is inner peace. And knowing that God is present and that you are loved and deserving and worthy of all the good things in life. The only real goal of the Course in Miracles is inner peace. And all the lessons and all the tools are designed to bring us that independent of what's happening in the physical universe. Okay, anything else, Nishank?
There is one more. Can we take it up?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
You spoke about guilt, so I thought I would ask this. I'm having trouble with a particular situation that makes me feel a lot of guilt. And my mind is telling me I have every reason to feel that. I have recently lost a cat and wondered if I could have saved his life by taking him to the doctor earlier. And I cannot seem to find a way out of this guilt that I'm feeling. And I obviously did not mean it to happen. Of course, no one would. But what if I could have prevented his death? This is Valerie is asking this, if you could answer it.
Yeah, you just can't afford to think like that. That is the voice of guilt going booga booga. You should have done something different for the cat. The ego thrives on shoulda, coulda, woulda. And it always finds some way to make what you did wrong. And I'm sure you did the best you could for the cat. Who wouldn't? So this is an immense opportunity to love yourself anyway and trust that you did the best you could, that you're a loving person, that the cat is in God's hands, and that all is well. And so, we do this thing in my life coach training. There's two voices. The voice of fear or guilt says this. And now what would the voice of love say in response? Well, the voice of love would say, all is well. Cat's in God's hands. I did the best I could. I don't deserve to feel guilty for any reason. I'm not a bad person. I'm a good person. I'll say one more thing and then we'll start to close up. I was watching a video last night on YouTube, and it was the Taizé choir. Do you know Taizé is it's a Christian tradition. I believe they're centered in France, T-A-I-Z. It's a kind of monastic devotional tradition. And they had a virtual choir of like 50 people singing a beautiful Christian hymn together. It was just so sweet. And I looked at these mostly young people, just beautiful faces, and from 50 different countries, from Russia and Lithuania and Mexico and America and China, these beautiful young people with lovely different nationalities. And their voices were so sweet. And I thought, none of these people deserve to be sick. That people are really, people are innocent. I just saw the innocence in these people so beautifully. And my heart was just so touched. I realized we're all innocent. We're all innocent. Nobody deserves to get coronavirus. Nobody deserves to have an economic challenge. Nobody deserves to be out of a job. These are all aberrations on God's will. None of this belongs to God's world. And what the Course in Miracles wants us to do is to get from the ego's world back to God's world. The ego says we deserve pain and suffering. God says, I'll have none of that. I'll have none of that. And that's the entire purpose of the Course in Miracles. Let's close with the prayers we usually do. Nishank, thank you so very much for your dedication. You're becoming a rock star in your own right. Thank you so much for helping with the questions.
Love doing
Let's
it.
close with a prayer. Thank you, Great Spirit, for bringing us together this month. We're so grateful for Course in Miracles. So grateful for the principles of the Course that really filter throughout all spiritual teachings. We know and ask and affirm deep blessings on everyone here, those listening live or to the archive. May everyone be well. May everyone be connected with their families. May we use our time at home for healing, connection, and blessing. And we recognize that all change is good. The changes that are happening in our lives and around the planet now are leading us to something far, far better. We do not see very clearly from ego. But when we drop into our hearts and see from love, trust, and faith, we realize that God is totally present, we're totally loved, and all is well.